Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. So today, we are going to be diving into some legal documents that you sent us. They're about a case involving the Estate Police Association, the EPA. You want to know what their role was in this 2-year delay in justice for some officers they were representing. You're specifically asking if they could have done more to prevent this setback. So we've got excerpts from a report that's really taking a close look at the EPA's involvement. And let me tell you, there are some pretty eyebrow-raising moments here.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumps out from this report is that it suggests the EPA, the very organization that was supposed to be advocating for these officers, and that have actually been a roadblock to them getting justice.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's set the stage here. The main issue is an appeal that was filed with the Privy Council. Now, for those who might not know, this is the highest court of appeal for a lot of Commonwealth countries, and for these officers, it was really their last hope for a fair outcome. But here's where things get kind of complicated. The appeal process was basically put on hold for 2 years. And the reason? The Special Tribunal, the one that handled the initial case, they didn't submit the necessary document. These are called the Record of Appeal to the Privy Council.
Yeah, and it's really important to grasp how serious this delay was. I mean, just imagine for a second being one of these officers, stuck in this legal limbo for 2 whole years. Career, reputation, everything just on hold. And think about all that time lost. Not to mention the emotional and financial strain.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 2 years is like an eternity when you're waiting for justice. So the question that just pops into my mind is, what was the EPA doing during all this time? I mean, they were supposed to be representing these officers, fighting for their rights. So were they just twiddling their thumbs while this delay just went on and on and on?
Well, according to the report, there were at least 4 very specific actions the EPA could have taken. Things that could have potentially prevented this whole situation.
Okay, I am all ears because this is where I started to really wonder what was going on.
All right, so first, maybe the most obvious thing.
Yeah.
They could have just kept a close eye on what the special tribunal was filing, just to make sure everything was on track. They could have been proactively following up. With the Court of Appeal, the Privy Council, requesting status updates, keeping their finger on the pulse of the case. That would have alerted them to the missing record of appeal way earlier.
Yeah, that seems like, I don't know, just basic due diligence.
Right.
Keeping track of the paperwork seems pretty straightforward. So what else could they have done?
Well, they could have put more pressure on the special tribunal, to actually fulfill their obligations. This could have meant filing motions in court, maybe issuing public statements, even reaching out to higher-ups in the judicial system, essentially making some noise and holding the special tribunal accountable for their inaction.
Got it. So not just sitting back passively, but actually pushing for their clients' rights. Okay, what about the third option?
Third, if everything else failed, they could have just taken over the appeal process themselves. Maybe hire their own legal team, prepare and submit that record of appeal, basically cutting out the special tribunal completely.
Wow, taking over the whole thing. That's commitment. Okay, so what was that fourth possible course of action you mentioned?
So the fourth option, and this is a big one, was to take a really hard look at the special tribunal's appeal itself.
Okay, yeah. Now this is where things get really interesting. The report suggests that there might have been something fundamentally wrong with the special tribunal's appeal, like right from the get-go. What was going on there?
Well, essentially, the report's saying that the special tribunal's appeal was just rehashing arguments, the same arguments that had already been rejected by the Court of Appeal. Think of it like you win a case, right? But the other side keeps appealing, using the exact same arguments over and over, even though they've already been shot down. Frustrating, isn't it?
Totally. It just seems like a waste of everyone's time and resources. But wouldn't there be rules against that kind of thing?
You're absolutely right. There are legal principles in place to prevent this kind of repetitive litigation.
Yeah.
The idea is, once a court has made a decision, you can't just keep appealing it on the same grounds, unless you have some brand new legal arguments or evidence. There needs to be a sense of finality. Judgments need to be final. Appeals need to raise substantial questions of law, not just rehash old ones.
So what you're saying is, the report is basically saying that the special tribunal's appeal, it was like a broken record. And the EPA didn't even try to turn it off. They didn't try to stop it.
That's pretty much it. And the thing is, there were actually steps they could have taken to object to this, this seemingly flawed appeal.
Like what? Tell me. I want to hear what they could have done but didn't.
So right off the bat, they could have filed a motion to dismiss the appeal, argue that it was an abusive process, or they could have challenged it at the preliminary stage before it even went to a full hearing. or even requested a cost order against the special tribunal, basically saying, look, you wasted everyone's time and money with this pointless appeal.
Okay, so there were legal ways to potentially just stop this whole thing right then and there. But again, the report's saying the EPA didn't do any of this. Am I right?
That's right, according to the report.
Yeah.
They just didn't pursue any of these options.
Yeah.
And, this could have had some really serious consequences for the officers.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking years of waiting that just didn't need to happen, mounting legal fees, potentially even psychological distress. It's a lot to deal with, especially when you feel like the organization that's supposed to be on your side isn't really doing enough to protect you.
It's honestly heartbreaking to think about, to be in that position, feeling so vulnerable, and then feeling like you're being let down by the people you're paying to fight for you. So this brings up a really crucial question for you, our listener. What can these officers actually do about this? I mean, can they hold the EPA accountable for these alleged missteps?
Well, the good news is they do have a couple of options.
Okay, good.
The report suggests two main avenues. First, they could demand an explanation from the EPA, hold their feet to the fire, say, hey, what happened here? Why weren't you guys fighting for us?
Mm-hmm.
Transparency is so important in any professional relationship, and these officers deserve a clear and honest account of what the EPA did, or I guess, didn't do during those 2 years.
Right. Demanding accountability seems like the obvious first step, but what if? What if that explanation isn't enough? What if the officers want to take things further?
That's where the second option comes in, a legal challenge. If the officers can show that they suffered harm, real tangible harm, as a direct result of the EPA's inaction, they might have grounds to sue for breach of duty.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that actually mean in this specific situation?
Okay, think about it this way. The officers were paying the EPA for a service, to represent them, to advocate for their rights in this legal battle. If the EPA didn't do that, if they failed to fulfill that duty, and the officers can prove that this failure led to real harm, like financial losses or emotional distress, then they might have a case.
So this isn't just about an apology or a change in policy. This could potentially be about financial compensation or other remedies for the harm they suffered. This could get serious.
It could. And this raises a broader point about informed consent and expectations in professional relationships, especially in something as important as legal representation.
Hold on. That's an interesting point. Are you saying there might be a disconnect between what the officers expected from the EPA and what the EPA actually delivered?
It's definitely something worth considering. Did the EPA communicate their strategy clearly to the officers? Did they lay out the potential challenges, the possible outcomes? Did the officers fully understand the risks, the potential for delays? Were there any misunderstandings, miscommunications? These are all questions that a court might consider.
Wow. This is getting even more complex. We're not just talking about the EPA's actions now. We're talking about the nature of their communication, the level of understanding between them and the officers they represented. This is fascinating stuff.
It is. And it really highlights how crucial communication and trust are in these relationships. Without that, it's so easy for misunderstandings to happen, for cases to drag on and on.
Yeah, it's a reminder that communication isn't just about being polite. It's about making sure everyone's on the same page, that expectations are aligned, especially when we're talking about legal matters, where the stakes are so high. That kind of clarity is essential.
Couldn't agree more. And let's not forget the human element here. These officers were going through something incredibly difficult, facing accusations, the potential end of their careers, and then to feel like the people they were relying on for support weren't there for them. That adds another level of stress and uncertainty.
Absolutely. This case is a powerful reminder that these legal battles aren't just abstract exercises. They have real consequences for real people, and it's so important that we approach them with sensitivity, empathy, a commitment to fairness.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? This isn't just about legal stuff. It's about real people and how all of this affects their lives, their careers, their peace of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why these cases are so important to look at. They remind us that there are always human stories behind these legal battles, and that the pursuit of justice should always be about empathy and concern for everyone involved.
Okay, so let's bring it back to our listener for a minute. What are the key takeaways from all of this? What can you learn from this EPA situation, even if you're not caught up in a legal battle yourself? Well, I think this case offers some really valuable lessons. For anyone who might be relying on an organization or an individual to represent their interests, whether it's a union, a professional association, or even just a lawyer handling a personal matter for you.
Okay, give us the rundown. What should our listeners be keeping in mind?
Well, first and foremost, It highlights how important it is to ask questions and to stay informed. Don't be afraid to ask your representative for detailed explanations about their strategy, the potential challenges, the possible outcomes.
So don't just sit back and passively accept what you're being told. Be proactive, dig a little deeper, make sure you really understand the whole picture.
Exactly. And if anything's unclear, or if you feel like your concerns aren't being addressed, don't hesitate to ask for clarification. Remember, you're the one who's ultimately affected by the outcome, so you have a right to be fully informed and involved every step of the way.
It's about being your own advocate even when you have someone representing you, making sure your voice is heard and your interests are being looked after.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you ever feel like your representative isn't doing their job, don't be afraid to hold them accountable. You might need to express your concerns directly, maybe seek a second opinion, or even consider finding someone else to represent you if necessary.
It sounds like the main message here is don't be passive, be informed, be engaged, be ready to stand up for yourself. Knowledge is power. Understanding your rights and your options can really make a difference when you're facing a tough situation.
Well said. And keep in mind, even in complex situations like the one we talked about today, there are usually multiple perspectives and potential solutions. It's important to really explore those options, weigh the risks and benefits, and ultimately make decisions that align with your values and goals.
It's been a really fascinating deep dive, and I think we've learned some really valuable things today. Thanks for joining us, and a big thank you to our expert for breaking down this complicated case for us.
My pleasure.
And to you, our listener, we hope this discussion has given you some things to think about, and maybe even given you a little more confidence and clarity to navigate your own challenges. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the issues that matter most to you.